Welcome to today's edition of Daytime Dialogues. It's my pleasure today to welcome Zvika Klein, the Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Jerusalem Post and the Jewish World Analyst. He is one of the top journalists in the world today dealing with the Jewish diaspora, and he was formerly the correspondent of Makor Rishon and Ma'ariv. And many of us remember back in 2015 when Zvika took that amazing walk through Paris, where he wrote an article of 10 hours of fear and loathing in Paris. It became viral. Watching him walk through Paris with a kippah. Zvika originally is a Chicagoan, and so I remember when he became a Chicagoan, when he was born. His parents, old-time B'nai Akiva friends of ours, families from Chicago, the Kleins and the Rublins, and it's a real pleasure to welcome Zvika today. So thank you so much for making time, Zvika.
Hi, how are you?
I am, Baruch Hashem, fine. How are you?
No, it's crazy times. There's this. Not everyone in Israel now says, like everyone. That's the answer. Like I'm like everyone. So whatever.
I heard this great expression. Someone told me that the answer is Noram Beseder. You have to have the right kind of pause in it.
I didn't hear that. Okay.
Yeah. So let me just start with yesterday. Yesterday, where there was this massive demonstration in Washington, D.C., 300,000 Jews came together. I was there. It was the biggest balagan and a great Kiddush Hashem that everyone was able to come. 5% of American Jewry was there with probably about a week and a half notice. But do you think it has an impact, all the Jews coming together, or did it just make us feel good?
I wasn't there. You were there, but I've been following it and covering it. I think that just 2 months ago we were in. We felt like the third temple was about to be destroyed, and suddenly, unfortunately, right, we're such a history just proves that we only know how to get together when we're suffering. But look at the amazing, diversity you have there. And I wrote an article about Friends of Peace Now telling their constituents come out to this rally, as well as Agudat Israel, right, on the Orthodox, ultra Orthodox side, and even the Satmar Rebbe not calling for this demonstration, but speaking out against Neturei Karta, the more extreme part, for meeting with anti-Israelis, Iranians, whatever, etc. So it feels like also here in Israel that the side effects are, positive, even though it's a terrible situation. But you have people talking and coming together and being together. My sense is that this is I don't know if it's a turning point, but it's definitely kind of a peak of something we haven't seen for a very long time. I mean, you're a little older than me, but we haven't seen anything like this for a long time. I don't know. Curious to hear what you think.
No, I don't know. It's fascinating. On the one hand, I would like to think that when the politicians in Washington see 300,000 Jews come together, it will sway opinions. I hope that's the case. And on the other hand, you never know. Or is it just a one-day thing and they say, okay, we'll make our appearance, we'll show bipartisanship, and then we'll go back to doing what we were before and move on. I don't know enough, but I do know it was this Kiddush Hashem of everyone being together and people as far as the eye could see. Some of the reports are saying it's the largest gathering of Jews in the United States ever, and something like this. So to that, I think it's amazing. In your covering now of the Jewish world, since the beginning of the war, what are you seeing are the major themes that are going on?
Outside of Israel.
Outside of Israel.
Yeah. It's funny because, I've been in the anti-Semitism business for 15 years, whatever. But you'll always be seeing, there are times where we write about a decrease in anti-Semitic events or the amount, but it usually gets less attention because, that's the way news works. It's if it's dramatic and negative, then it gets more attention. But I do feel that this is different. Again, the statistics are showing hundreds or sometimes thousands of % increase in anti-Semitic attacks all around the world, in France, in the UK. in almost every place where there are Jewish communities, um, people are like it shook them up. Um, Also, people getting together, kind of, internally, kind of uniting and thinking of the future. I think the fact that Israel is this insurance policy that turned out to be not as safe as everybody thought it was, makes you wonder, makes you think about what your future is, what Israel's future is. Um, and there are people, I mean, again, I wrote about, I mean, again, in America, but like, people, leaving NYU because of anti-Semitism, because the administration is not dealing with it, and this is NYU. We're not talking about like a tiny little, I don't know, a tiny little university in, I don't know, Southern America. We're talking about, New York. Um, so there's, I think a lot of anxiety, and uncertainty. Interestingly, there's been, in the Israeli Aliyah and Integration Ministry, um, showed an increase in interest in Aliyah from North America and from France. That doesn't mean that that will actually happen, but again, from my experience, in 2023, or I don't know, in this century, most Jews live in Western countries. They're not going to just make Aliyah because of one incident, right? But if you're already a Zionist or pro-Israel and you have family, or I don't know, something else, and there's a push factor, right? That can cause, even though Israel is in a very bad situation, but people are interested in looking into that possibility. So
So Israel is preparing for a bump in Aliyah?
I don't think Israel has the bandwidth at the moment to actually, but I mean, the ministry is saying that, again, obviously they have an interest to say that. Um, Again, there is some sort of an interest. I'll say that, most people that made Aliyah in Israel's history did not make Aliyah just for Zionistic reasons. Most people made Aliyah when it was bad, when the Jewish communities they lived in were suffering. So
Do
yeah.
you think this might be the same? And in terms of coverage in the news, in the United States, at least, we're beginning to see that shift, or even like Canada's Prime Minister Trudeau came out with his outrageous statement. If you were to guess, and if things were to continue, God forbid the war needs to go on for more time, and it does go on, where do you think the public opinion is going to move in the United States and in diaspora, and how will it impact Israel?
I think I'll add to that the Israeli Foreign Ministry said yesterday that they had to stop their hasbara efforts because they ran out of money. So it's
What?
like a classic. Yeah, you can
Oh,
see there are reports. You can see it. Um, and whatever. I think they may have settled it or not, but like, we need to be smarter and we need to work better. And so, for instance, I mean, there's this 40-something-minute video, right, that shows a lot of the horrors that happened on October 7th. The IDF spokesperson is showing it to select audiences of like opinion leaders, parliament members, heads of state, etc. Um, it's a very kind of sensitive. Like, you can't just show it to your synagogue. You need a representative from the IDF to come. There needs to be a computer without internet, and it's, on the one hand, I'm like, I want the whole world to see this, because that's what they're like. If you go into like news sites in Europe or whatever, I don't know, different countries around the world, like, you'll see all these horrors. Some of them are real and some are not real, of what's going on in Gaza, right? And there are reasons for the fact that there still are people there, even though the IDF has been begging them for weeks to leave. Um, but on the other hand, Israel is not a terror organization, and it is a democratic country. And if the families of those who were killed or kidnapped or injured, and that's what basically happened, said, what we only allow to show this to audiences that will actually them watching it will make a difference, there may be something to be said about it, because again, we're not barbaric and we're not looking, to kill and we're not looking to, and we're not brutal. We're not,
Have you
um,
have you seen it?
I've only seen parts. I've seen parts. I didn't watch the whole thing. I don't have a need to, I don't need that, um, what's the word? I don't need to be, convinced. You know, I mean, I'm convinced of what happened. I've heard the stories. I've been to places like Be'eri. Um, it's like going. It's like visiting Auschwitz a few days later, Mamish. Like that's what it is. And it's an experience that, and there's a big question of what do we do with it now? Do we, you know? So like, yes, Zaka, whatever, they took care of the, you know, um, bodies or body parts, but you have, entire communities that are like destroyed or semi-destroyed, depending on the house. Um, and it's out of this world. Like there's no way to explain it. So yeah.
So from that aspect of Hasbara, let's assume for the moment the government ran out of funds, but you're at the Jerusalem Post and you know what happened. And a colleague of yours who may be in a paper in the United States or a paper in Europe begins to talk about war crimes that Israel is committing and how Israel is not being proportionate and that there needs to be a ceasefire. How do you as a journalist, do you ever get into it with your colleagues, or do you just do what you do?
I mean, you kind of like me for a while, I guess. I'm not that type of I don't like. I don't get into like debates or whatever. That's not my cup of tea. There are people that thrive from that type of, but I think someone once told me, he's like, Israel is in the Middle East. It's not in Europe. It's not in North America. There are different rules. You can't expect everything that, as if your country that you live in goes, that it goes by or whatever, will be the same here, because we're in the Middle East. Like every single border, whether we have a peace agreement with them or not, there's a potential threat. So that's not something that any European country, Western European country could understand. Americans can't understand it. So, and we're in an era where it's very difficult to show complexity, right? Like I only heard part of the Trudeau statement, but a lot of the statement was actually very pro-Jewish and pro-Israel, right? So like when you just take one headline, it's uh, you know, um, so it's a very difficult situation. I would also show, Arab Israelis, speak to Arab Israelis and hear what they have to say. Many of them are like, we don't want Hamas. We don't want to be we don't want to live under them. At the end of the day, it's difficult to be a minority and definitely in Israel. But they're able to be doctors, to be most the pharmacists in Israel are Arabs. So you see many patriotic um, Muslim or Christian Arab Israelis, and if you just speak to them, you understand that this is not black and white. But the difficulty is just like when we established a state, we were the David against the Goliath. Now it's the opposite. So, and also I think another thing is that we actually gave up this land to them. We gave it to them on a silver platter, and what do they do with it? It's not, nothing to write home about. So that's something that people don't understand.
When I was in Israel a couple of weeks ago, and we were sitting in Kibbutz Zikim and speaking to the Maskir Pnim at the time, this was a person who was far left, who was in favor of disengagement, who was protesting on the left against the government. And we asked him what would it take for the 900 people who are not there right now to come back, and he said security. And we then said, "What's security?" He said, "If I can sit here and see the coast," which was another way of saying if everything was destroyed. Where is the left in Israel today? How are they dealing with this?
Fascinating. It's a fascinating situation. I actually, I wanted one of our reporters to write about it, and if that doesn't work, I may have to do it. But I'm just because I'm intrigued. They're in a very complex situation. But also the right wings in a different way. But um, um, so there's that, gisha that you said, right? Of people, saying, listen, you speak to families from Be'eri or Kfar Aza whose families were either killed or kidnapped, and they say, we don't care. We've been, Kfar Aza, like people on their refrigerators, supposedly, there's still like a list of, they used to give rides to Palestinians with children that had surgeries in an Israeli hospital. Those are the people that live in Kfar Aza, like they're peace activists. Um, and so in the one hand, on the one hand, it shatters kind of an entire ideology. Um, there, I would say again, what I'm hearing is more what you heard, less than people saying, "Oh well, because we occupied them for X amount of years and stuff like that." Um, um, there's a lot of cheshbon nefesh, I feel like, in many of the populations. For instance, many super right wing people are like, don't support Netanyahu anymore. And they like went after him. Like for years they were supporting him, and suddenly they're like, maybe we were wrong about certain things. And I mean, there are talks about, and also, by the way, Haredim are going through an interesting phenomena. You have a few thousand Haredim enlisted into the IDF since this happened, and which is like, I think, more than usually happens annually. So this is just a month and a half or whatever. Um, Someone sent me a video of like a mainstream Haredi yeshiva, like a wedding or some event, and they were singing Hatikva. It's like suddenly things are shifting, and there are talks about it that politically this will also influence Israeli politics. So there'll be, I mean, the assumption is the next government, whenever that will be more center. And in surveys, you see people are looking for like the people who most symbolize being in the center or achdut and unity. They have the highest appreciation or the highest will for them to be in leadership positions. So I hope that sentiment continues, but and then we could have some sort of a stability, like a center-ish leaning both right and left. Um, so I mean, it's. I feel like almost every single group in Israel has a different type of inner cheshbon nefesh and thought of what should be or how should it be.
And to just go through a little bit more with you on this, the Haredim who joined into the army, and I've heard about it as well, has there been any conversation with them of why they chose now? Is this a real shift, or is this just an anomaly? Given the size of the Haredi population, a few thousand may not be significant at all.
Well, I think it's because, again, if I think if I remember correctly, let's say if annually there's like 2 or 3 thousand Haredim who go into the army, and now within the same like a tenth of that period of time, the same number join in masses again according, maybe small according to, if you look at the entire Haredi population. But it comes from a sense of we need to be we need to be more part of the country than we were. And I mean, again, many, you know this probably better than me, that like many Haredi or mainstream yeshivish or American Jews are not. quote unquote Zionistic. They're not learning Rav Kook and Herzl's texts, but they're pro-Israel, probably sometimes more than other groups. Um, so that's something that also happened to Haredi Israelis who are, and I think also this last government was very extreme on so many issues that there's an understanding among some of the leadership that this can and will backfire. And also think about it, like they were not, you know, who was killed or injured in these terror attacks, right? It was secular left wing Israelis in these kibbutzim and moshavim. It was all types of Israelis who are in the army who came to try and save them or who were serving in a base. They weren't Haredim. So, and by the way, there are amazing Haredi initiatives of chesed, of volunteering, of making food, of anything you could even imagine to the general populations and shivas, making sure they have minions or people visiting them and whatever. But they also understand that I have certain friends who are like strategically behind the scenes been pushing toward this direction for a long time. It's to further integrate into Israeli society, again, without compromising on certain ideals, but also at the same time understanding that they can't just live in a parallel state.
And do you think, again, to project further, there will be commissions, inquiries of what happened. At the end of the day, is this the end of the Netanyahu administration?
Smarter and more and wiser people than me have already, said that his era has ended so many times. So I'm not going to be the one to say that. Again, if you look at polls, as much as they're worth, support for him is the lowest it's probably ever been. And also, many people in this government have been perceived as extreme or just speaking in a very negative way. And so the Likud party as well has lost a lot of support. The question is, who is going to be that next big leader? I am not going to bet on that one.
And in terms of responses that have happened, is there anything that, beyond the idea of the unity, is there anything that's happened that really has been surprising for the good? Something that no one would have ever expected?
That's a good question. I just think the unity comes in all sorts of forms and sizes, and it's incredible. And again, being a journalist, nowadays there's just so much information flowing and coming in. You just can't. And let's say there's like a large percentage of important things, you just can't do it. You can't get to it. But they're just the amount of positivity coming from citizens and the amazing infrastructures people just either built or based on existing organizations is overwhelming. It's just, you can't even imagine. I wrote a short column about like the street I live in Efrat, where at a certain point there's barely any men because they're all in reserve, and then all the kids come to me to pump their bikes, and I'm not the most technical person, if you know my father or whatever, but that's one thing I know how to do. And I said, and I was working at home one day. They came at like 12. They came at 2. They came at 4. And I was like, you know what? Like this, if that's my contribution, that these kids, their fathers, who knows how long away, I'll do it. That's just like a tiny example. But I was moved when all of my neighbors whose husbands were in Miluim got these packages from Mizrahi in Canada, like food for Shabbat. Like they just ordered it from a catering place here, and they told them ahead of time they were going to get it, so they knew they didn't have to cook as much or whatever. And each one of them got it from different family. in Canada, and it's amazing, and it really helps. It really does help.
It is amazing in that sense. I'm just trying to figure out what will be if you were giving advice to someone in Chutz La'aretz, in the diaspora, of what they can do to help. What would you tell them is the most important thing?
Your questions are too good. I have to. I think there are those who talk about it, who I remember when there was the war in Ukraine, and I got phone calls from different philanthropists about where should we donate, what should we do, and there are those that like who ask, and there are those that do, and I think that like just doing anything that you know how to do, or you feel comfortable doing, or you have enough means to do, you should just do it. You know what I'm saying? Like there are people who are like, and there is an overwhelming amount of yes of positivity, but as in the war in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine is still happening. It's still going on, but the world just kind of forgot it, and that's important to keep it. And definitely when we, I think keeping the um and that's definitely a Hasbara or a media issue, is keeping public opinion and knowledge that Israel has 239 mainly civilians who are held, hostage by a terrorist organization, who were, you know, dragged out of their homes, just because they're Jewish, just because they're Israeli. We can't let that go until something actually happens. But you could also just do smaller things, like just buying someone food for Shabbat. Obviously someone checks and makes sure, that they really need it. That's amazing, like it really helps because these women are suddenly like these like single mothers. Um, and there's like these coffee shops by us that like, once or twice a week, there's a whole thing where someone donates and all the mothers, all the women whose husbands are Miluim, they get a cup of coffee and a Danish or something, but then there's kids that have activities, food that people make for them. So I think it's important.
Someone had suggested to me that one of the things that American Jews can do is just pick up the phone and talk to somebody who they know in Israel just to say, "How are you doing?" Have you got any calls like that?
I did actually. Um, I have to confess that for the first time in my life, I worked on Shabbat, on October 7th. I didn't get any rabbinic approval for it, but my sense was that there are people, at least here in Israel, that need to know what is happening if they don't read Hebrew. Um, and the amount of messages I started getting then, but also afterwards from people all over the world, it was very heartwarming. I think it's important. I wouldn't say, I don't know, is that the most important thing? Um, I mean, American Jews, again, involved American Jews, like that's what they do. Like they already know what to do. You know what I'm saying? Like you're used to it. It's not like inventing the wheel. I was actually on a delegation. When was it? A year or two, a few years ago. I think I was on a delegation. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in America, and we were on a delegation of like Israeli journalists and opinion leaders to the U.S. to show solidarity with Jewish communities in the New York, New Jersey area. And they were just like so moved by the fact that we were giving them the attention and we were interested. I think we just got used to the fact that like people like you just come every time that there is, whatever. But I think at a certain point, I think people have to just start coming again, right?
And
I think that's
no,
yeah.
it's fascinating. By the way, when you come to Israel today, any hotel you go to, unless if you go to the highest end hotels, you're inundated with kids running around in their pajamas because they're staying there. They're evacuees who are staying there. And my favorite story is at the Ramada Renaissance in Yerushalayim. There's a sculpture in the front, and when I went to there were little kids lined up to climb up the sculpture and then jump off it. And I could just imagine what the hotel manager was thinking to himself. It's being there is so very important, but you're providing us with the information. And this time is I assume the newspaper is working much harder than ever before.
Also, you have people who are miluim, who are
Oh, yeah.
So you have less human resources, and the more Zionistic the newspaper is, the more people you have in miluim. So
Has readership jumped during the
yeah,
war?
substantially. Yeah. Yeah.
Zvika, our time is up. I want to thank you for giving me this half hour. For those
Thank
who don't
you.
know, the last time we were officially scheduled, it was when a siren was going off, and Zvika had to be
Right.
going into his mamad with his kids. So we had to postpone it to now. Thank God it's a little quieter, especially in the Gush. And you should continue to stay safe and continue to inform us and help shape that opinion that's so very important for all of us. Thank you so
Thank you very
very much.
much.
Bye bye. Have a wonderful day.